Hello, everyone, and welcome to FaM Sports Varsity. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marcelio Langella. And Mars, this is our Section 1A team previews. We're a couple weeks away from the season, but before we welcome in our fans, how's it going, brother?
It's going well, man. We have 2 weeks left until
March
football.
8th.
It's coming close, man. And we are diving right into our team previews, which is, let's just say, it's a very thorough, informational video about all these different teams, very talented teams. So, I mean, you thought the Frank's Finest was intense? Imagine what the team previews are going to be.
Yes, and those who don't know, we want to welcome all our fans for tuning in. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. What our team previews are is we're going to go through each program in the classes. This is for 1A. We did our 1AA before, and we'll continue to do the other classes in the days and weeks ahead. And for those out there watching for the first time, you guys can always follow us on Twitter at FamSportsVF. And you can follow us on Instagram at FamSportsNYVF. And obviously, you're watching this from YouTube. So, give us a thumbs up, share the video, subscribe, and obviously give us feedback. We love feedback, and we love talking ball with everybody, fans, coaches, players, anybody. But, Mars, let's just get into it because you mentioned 1A's got 20 teams in it, right? Mm-hmm. This is a deep class. And probably the most talented class, if you look at the talent top to bottom from all of Section 1. And looking into this back in 2019, the last time they played a section championship, Rye beat Yorktown in 2019. But A has gone through some changes, right? Mahopac, Spring Valley have joined A. Head and HUD has went down. Poughkeepsie went to Independent. And so did Peekskill, and Fox Lane went up to AA. So there are definitely changes in A that what we've seen from 2019. And Mars, are you ready to – actually, before we go into it, I got to do that disclaimer like we did last time. When we talk about projected starters, Mars, again, they're projected starters. These are based on last year's team, last year's tape, conversations we had with the coaches. And we didn't have conversations with all the coaches, and we'll say that up front right now. And we're always still open to talk to coaches, but, these are projected starters. That doesn't mean any starters we were told have clinched their spot. And the names that we bring out is people that we've talked to and what we've seen. And if you're not being called, it's not an indictment on what we think of you as a football player, but I think it should motivate you as a football player to make your stamp on your team.
Yeah, I mentioned this in the other video we did, the other team preview, that just because we don't name you doesn't mean that you aren't the starter or you can't make your way to become one during the season. And I said this in even the first video we had. You could practice hard, and you can become a starter. And this is going to be so evident now with COVID happening and seasons being shortened, and it's going to be really important just for every kid to really just step up their game.
Yeah, and how this is going to work, we're going to go through each of the divisions that were created in 2020. Now, again, things can change, obviously, with the season. But based on the division we do in 2020, we'll run through the divisions, and then we'll have a discussion about a couple of the teams after each division. All right, Mars? But let's start, because we've got a lot to go through. And we're going to start in Somers. And this team has become one of the most prominent programs in A, Mars. In 2019, they went 7-2. They lost to Rye in the semifinals, which has kind of become a bit of a rivalry these last few years between those two programs. But Somers, top to bottom, is a well-oiled machine. Right from the youth going all the way up to the varsity, the kids deserve a boatload of credit with the time and effort that they put in. And I think the staff on Somers doesn't get enough credit for the work that they do to build that program to what it's been. And, it just shows the evidence, the statistics show. 4 straight years, Mars, of 6 or more wins. Since 2004, Mars, they've only had one losing season, which was in 2015. That just shows you consistency. Mm-hmm. And this team is going to be another very talented Somers team. They're projected to return 6 of their 11 starters on offense, bringing back their quarterback, 3 of the 5 starters on the offensive line. Defensively, 6 of the 11 starters, okay? Just to go through the players that they have, it all starts obviously with Jack Kaiser, Mars, right? Running back and linebacker. He was Frank's Finest all-state player. He's one of my favorite backs. I've made that known. I think he is arguably the best back in Section 1, and he's just a downhill runner. He's perfect for the wing tee at the fullback spot. He just checks off a bunch of boxes, and we've talked about him plenty, so there's not much to say. He definitely is the guy that every defensive coordinator who plays Somers is going to focus on him and have to be the number one guy they have to take away, which tells you a lot about him. Moving on, Mars, another guy, Frank's finest. He's going to be an important two-way player. That's TJD. And running back and linebacker, he's going to have a bigger role at that halfback spot, that wing back, slot back, whatever you want to call him, to replace a guy like Balancia from last year, Mars. He is a strong runner, and he's got really good straight-line speed. You're going to see his role in the offense definitely go up. Defensively, again, he was a Frank's finest. He's really disruptive on the edge, especially rushing the passer. He's going to be an important two-way player. Another name to keep in mind, Mars, at the running back and defensive back spot, Nate Rosenwig, the senior. He's a good complement to TJ at that wing back spot. He's more of a shifty runner when Deegan's more of a powerful runner. But this kid was shifty. He made some plays last year for Somers, and he's going to be a good complement for outside runs, for counters and stuff like that. But to me, I'm always going to try to name at least an X factor and a breakout player. And this is going to be my X factor. The quarterback, Jackson Casal, the senior. This kid is a dual threat kid. He's really dangerous running the football in that wing T offense when they run those down keeps, those waggles, those quarterback sweeps. Really dangerous on the edge, but he also does a good job on play action to throw people open and show some accuracy. This kid is going to be the guy who can really elevate this offense because a lot of people are going to be focusing on a guy like Jack Kaiser like they did last year, and this would open it up for this guy who made some plays for them. And Jackson is definitely somebody. But my breakout guy, and usually you want to name a breakout guy that you don't really think about, Mars, or is under the radar. And I know he's not, but he is my breakout guy. And that's Jake Polito, the offensive line, because it is going to start up front on both the offensive and defensive line. This kid, sophomore, Frank's finest. I think he has the tools to be the best lineman in Class 1A. I said it during the Frank's Finest video. Powerful kid. Again, really young, playing on the varsity level and had significant time. I want to see this kid's growth. This is why I believe he could be a breakout player, because this growth from his second year on varsity could be scary. A couple other names, Mars, Danny Curran, the senior, Lou Verard, Colin Smith. These are all offensive linemen. They're going to be huge. Another guy, offensive lineman, linebacker, Anthony Cheat, to round it off. Not a tall kid, but a tough as nails kid. His brother was, I think it was his brother that was on the team last year, defensive line, who was really good. And finally, to wrap it all up, a young guy, Ethan Kraus, linebacker. He was a junior, 6'1", 195 pounds, good size. He showed some flashes on tape, and I'm interested to see this kind of kid, how he grows to that next year. Again, young football player last year. How does he go in his second year of varsity? Still a junior, so this is going to be what's interesting. If this was a normal season, Mars, we don't know if there's going to be playoffs or not. This Somers team has the talent that they can compete for that championship if there is one. They would have been one of those teams that you look at that could definitely be a finals. I think they have the talent at each level to be one of those finalist teams. Mars. Moving on, let's go to Mahopac. They were in AA last year. They're coming down to single A. 2019, they went 3-6. No playoffs for them. And I think this is a big year for Mahopac. They had back-to-back 3-6 seasons for the first time since before 2004. And in that same span since 2004, they've never had 3 straight losing years in a row. So I think this is a huge year for Mahopac. The good news is they're bringing back a lot of guys who saw time last year. I know they project about 5 of the 11 offensive starters, but they rotated about 21 kids on offense. And I think about 12 of them were underclassmen. Defensively, they're bringing back 7 of the 11 starters, projected-wise. So they're bringing back a lot of kids who had an experience. And the 2 names that really pop out to me on this Mahopac team, got to start with Vincent Bastone, right? Running back, linebacker. This kid's 6'2", 180 pounds. Really versatile running back. He can run downhill. He has the speed to run outside. And he lined up in multiple spots. He's, throwing to him on the edge. He was quarterback for a long time. But when they moved him to the running back spot, this kid shows his athleticism. He can play multiple spots. He can do multiple things. He can line up at quarterback and run power read. This kid is their top kid. Another kid to keep in mind on the offensive line, Dominic Paracone. This kid's a mountain of a man at 6'4", 280 pounds. He's really the anchor on the offensive line. Big, strong guy. Interested to see his growth and how his feet got better from last year. But this kid is a big, big kid, and they're going to have some size up front. I think giving Bastone the ball as much as possible behind that big offensive line will serve them wonders, Mars. Moving on to the next team, let's talk about Brewster. And they're coached by Ed Mulvihill, and he's been there since 2012. In 2019, they had a very good year, 7-2. They lost to Yorktown in the first round. But 2019, Mars, was their best win total since 2016 when they went 8-1. They haven't had back-to-back winning seasons since 2015, 2016. So this is going to be an interesting year for Brewster. And Stars-wise, they are going to lose a bunch of players. Offensively, they're returning 4 of the 11, but they lose their top 3 rushers and their top receiver. So a lot of firepower being gone. Good news is they're bringing the quarterback back, and the offensive line, Mars, 3 out of the 5 offensive linemen are returning. We talk about the importance of having continuity in the offensive line. Even bigger loss is probably on defense, where they're only returning about 3 of their 11 starters. They lost all 4 defensive backs, 2 linebackers, so you're going to see a lot of new faces for Brewster. And during the COVID time, it's going to be difficult. But when I spoke to Coach, offensively, he said it straight out. The playbook is definitely going to slim down because they want to be more efficient. But they want to throw the ball because they are returning one of their better players, which is the quarterback spot. And they want to sling the ball around. Defensively, they run that 4-3. They adjust year to year based on the personnel. But what he sets a good mindset. And what he'd like to talk about is on defense, he likes to take a picture when a play ends. And he wants to see if everyone is in that photo, right? And it just shows that they're rallying to the ball. And I really like that mindset. It's a similar mindset that we did as a defense. You take a picture at the end of a play, and do you see 11 defensive players in that picture frame? If not, maybe everyone's not hustling. But the goals for Coach, and he was simple. He said, don't look ahead, get better each week. They think they're going to be big up front, but behind that up front is going to be the biggest question for this team. And when I talk about the players on this team, Mars, it all starts on this side with one of the best two-way players in Section 1, Franco Milano, the defensive end and outside linebacker. Again, Frank's finest, all-state player, really disruptive on the defensive end, both in the run and pass game, one of the top-notch defensive players. And offensively, again, powerful kid, strong hands, can move bodies. He is going to be the pinnacle for this team on both sides of the ball. But another guy, I think the breakout player for this team is Chris Donahue, the junior quarterback. 6'4", kid is built, has nice arm strength, showed a lot of flashes as a sophomore. And this is Coach said he wants to put the ball in his hands and make him make plays. And this kid has that potential to do that. The question is, who's he going to be throwing to, right? So one of the names to keep on is running back and defensive back Christian Rhodes, the senior. He was a wide receiver last year. He's moving to running back this year. Is he going to be the lead back? They had some studs at the back spot last year that made a lot of big plays. Is Christian Rhodes going to be that guy? Another interesting player, tight end and defensive end, Jason Bosari. And, I lined up at tight end, but defensive end is what really kind of impressed me. He's that other guy with Franco Milano. Franco Milano, stud, gets all the notoriety, and deservingly so. But Jason's an impressive kid on the other side of the defensive line at the edge spot, and he wins, with an explosive first step. He just has a high motor, and he was disruptive in both the pass and run game as well. They have a pretty good book defensive ends on either side, and Jason is a good complement to Franco. Another kid to keep in mind, talking about defense, they lost a lot of guys. Dominic Rienzi, right, the junior. This kid, 5'9", 205 pounds, not tall, but he has a nose for the football, and I'm going to be interested to see this young man, step into a bigger role. Again, junior, young football player. And another guy, Bryce Washington. This kid, wide receiver and defensive back, another junior, speedy kid with solid height, a smooth athlete. Brewster is going to rely on some of these young football players because they lost a ton of guys to step in and have a big role. And it's going to be tough. Defensively, they're going to be young at the linebacker spot. They need some kids to step up at the skill spot. You're going to see who's going to be the lead running back. There's a lot of questions for Brewster, but again, Brewster, well-coached football team, and they have some studs coming back that were on last year's team, so I'm interested to see that dynamic, Mars. Let's move on to Lourdes, Mars, coached by Brian Walsh. He's been there since 2010. I think he's one of the most underrated. Who calls Coach Walsh underrated? But when you're in a class that has a lot of good coaching, Walsh kind of gets overlooked. He's one of the best coaches in Section 1. In 2019, they went 4-4, which is not, a crazy good record on Walsh's standards. They lost to John Jay Cross River in the quarterfinals, but they pulled off that big upset in the qualifying round to make the playoffs. They beat Nyack. And Mars Walsh is at 271 career wins, which is tied for 10th all time. He's 2 wins from 9th all time. They've had 6 or more wins 8 out of the last 10 years since Walsh has been there. And, anyone who knows the story, they were Class B Lourdes. They were winning like crazy. They moved to A, and he's still competitive, right? So it just shows you the kids and the coaching staff, what they've done a really good job. They've never been under 500 since 2010. Again, really good job by him. The starters and defensive guys coming back was a little bit difficult to tell because we didn't get to speak to Coach, unfortunately. But some of the names to watch has to start with, I think, one of the best skill guys coming back, and that's Andrew Apolea. I know he's reclassifying, so he's still considered a sophomore, I believe. But Frank's finest, this kid at 6'4", 215 pounds, an absolute force at tight end. He is a well-rounded tight end. He's a target in the passing game. You can line him up wide. You can line up inline, and he's a devastating blocker, right? He can block defensive ends. He can block linebackers. He can block DBs. This kid's one of the better skill guys. Another Frank's finest, Mars, Joe Krause, safety, outside linebacker, and wide receiver. This kid on defense, Frank's finest, a stud against the run. Really good athlete, lined up multiple spots. Again, on defense, we talked about him at the Frank's finest video. Offensively, though, he is a very productive two-way player. He caught the ball. He was successful on jet sweeps. This is going to be a really important kid, an important cog to complement Andrew on the tight end spot. It all comes back down to what the quarterback does, too, because they're bringing back their quarterback, Brandon Jorgensen, the senior. This kid at 6'4". I really like his ability to throw in between the numbers, Mars. He can be accurate at all three levels, especially in between the numbers. This kid, lanky kid, but I tell you, he's got a nice anticipation, nice touch, and this is going to be another important football player, again, at the quarterback spot, getting the ball to his weapons. They have the quarterback who can do it. Another kid to keep in mind, linebacker and running back, Connor Gioia. I'm not good with names, so don't be insulted if I butcher yours a little bit, but this kid, well-built, 6 feet, 205 pounds, and at the linebacker spot, can play some running back. I'm interested to see if they're going to put him at fullback. This kid is going to be an important guy because they need that lead back. And finally, the guy who was getting more and more reps at the running back spot, Angelo Salato, the junior, 5'9", 215 pounds, not tall, but got good thickness, got good center of gravity, bounces off people, kind of a pinball kind of player. But he did well on even sweeps where he doesn't look like he's moving that fast, but he's got some deceptive speed. He's got game speed. And, Lourdes has some talent coming back. It's all going to be about up front. But finally, to round it off, the X factor to me, athlete, defensive back, and even played some quarterback, Nigel Whitaker, the junior. He was at Poughkeepsie. He moved or transferred to Lourdes. This kid is a very smooth athlete, not the tallest guy, but an electric football player. This is my X factor on this team. And I think they have weapons on both sides of the ball, especially in the back end. The question is going to be up front, offensive line, defensive line. Can they mesh together? Can they get those guys? Because they have the weapons. They have the quarterback. They have the weapons to be successful. And on defense, I think they have the linebackers. They have some of the DBs. Can they find the guys to win up front? Mars, finally, to round it off, before we go into discussion, let's talk about Beacon. Coached by Jim Phelan. He's been there since 2018. 2019, they went 2-7, no playoffs. And, this is a rebuilding program. Well, let's just be honest. It's a rebuilding program. Coach is trying to build this thing back up. They're looking for their first above 500 record since 2014. And, it's going to take some time, but I think Coach is headed in the right direction. Offensively, they are going to bring back some kids, right? 6 out of the 11 are coming back, but it's still going to be young, right? 3 sophomores, 3 juniors. These are young football players, but at Beacon, they come to the varsity very quick, right? So they're going to have a couple years into the system. They do bring back their quarterback, who I think is their best player, offensive line, 2 out of the 5. Where they're really going to have to replace guys is defensively, right? 3 out of the 11 starters coming back, Mars. They lost all their defensive linemen, including probably their best football player in Negron. But a few rotational guys are coming back as well. So, they're looking for them to fill in that void. And when I spoke to Coach, offensively, they want to play aggressively, right? They want to rely on their stud quarterback. And defensively, they want to bring that offensive aggression to the defensive side. Aggression was the big word in our conversation that we had. Goals-wise, Coach talked about he wants to have something for the seniors. They might not play football ever again, and he expects, not a lot of these guys are going to be playing football. And that, again, you got to take a step back and think about that. Like, this could be the last time these kids play football, and that's how important it was to have a season in March. And then Coach reiterated that he wants the seniors to build something. And, just talking about the way that this group has grown or the program has grown, this is going to be the first year in a long time that they're going to have a, modified JV and varsity, right? And, big programs don't understand what it's like to do that, but that's an accomplishment, right? To get a JV. And, Beacon hasn't had a JV in a while. To get a JV, that's a win. It's a program win, right? It might not win on the stats, but eventually you hope that it builds to wins, Mars. But talking about the players, it starts with the quarterback, right? Jason Cormisor, 6'3", solid arm, solid mobility. He is going to be the big factor for this team. Another junior, this is on the offensive line and defensive end, Tyler Haight, third-year varsity player. Another guy on the offensive line, Amir Bell, guard and defensive lineman, third year on the varsity, right? You're getting the kind of the picture. A couple other juniors, Mars, Isaac Hansen. He's completely transformed his body. Not a tall kid at 5'8". Coach said pound for pound, he's probably the strongest kid in the section, Mars. Just think about that. Wow. In the section, this kid, you should see the weight he throws around for a guy who's like 100-something. Like he's not even 200 pounds. But this kid has really built himself up. But another junior, he's going to be a key cog on both sides of the linebacker, running back spot. Cody Shields, another wide receiver, junior. Another junior running back and linebacker, Jamal Sellers. You see, I just named a bunch of juniors. So on my take on this team, Mars, they feel like they're a year away because then these juniors are going to be in the program multiple years. Next year they'll be seniors. But don't disregard this team. But again, this feels like another young football team that Bobby gets better as the season goes along. Might be a little bit rough in the beginning. A lot of underclassmen still. So it's not going to be easy in a gauntlet that is their division with Somers, Brewster, Lourdes. That's not easy, right?
No, it's not.
But that's where they are, and we're going to see how they grow this year. Mars, what are some of the teams you want to talk about?
I'm going to first talk about Somers. I think that Somers has one of the most talented teams in Class 1A. I mean, they usually do, and I mean the fact that they're returning 6 to 11 stars in both offense and defense is definitely going to help them. But having a bell cow in Jack Kaiser is really going to benefit their offense. And, I mean, we've had a whole Frank's Finest show about him, so not to go in too deep, but I really like the kid, and I think he's going to be a complete force this season. But you can definitely look at a lot of these other athletes on Somers because a lot of them were on the Frank's Finest list, and we picked them for a reason. TJ Deegan is another great athlete. I really like the way he plays, powerful runner. Yeah. And then the X factor, as you kind of mentioned before, Jackson Casau. Yes. As everyone's looking at Kaiser, how is he going to now take the opportunities given to him and make the plays in which, because you can't always ride on the back on some of these other athletes like TJ Deegan and Kaiser to kind of push everything.
And he did a good job of it last year.
Yeah, no, he did. And I'm just saying, a lot of defense is going to key on those two guys, and it'll open up a lot of chances for Casau to really do things on his own, but it all really starts with the offensive line. It starts with Jake Polito, and I really like the way he plays. He's a Frank's Finest. He's an animal. He's a monster. But the rest of the offensive line, I know that 3 of the 5 offensive line are returning, but I really think the solid core group of guys that Somers has is really going to help them really just move defenses, and I think that's going to be something that's going to help them for this season. The next one I'm going to focus on is going to be Brewster. Now, Brewster is on the opposite end. They lost a lot of talent, and I think that's a very difficult thing, especially with COVID. Especially with, any season when you lose a lot of your talent, it's hard to bounce back and have a successful season. But now in a COVID season where you're now limited on time, and I think Coach kind of said it the right way. You have to slim down your playbook. You have to play it smart. You can't throw the whole, and I said this on the other show, can't throw the whole kitchen sink at these teams. It's going to be simple but aggressive, and I think that's a very good strategy. But it all really, I think the most beneficial thing for Brewster is you have some star athletes on your team. Like Franco Milano is somebody we keyed in on our Frank's Finest show in this class because he is a fantastic athlete, really good two-way player. But the X factor, and I think somebody to look out for, as you mentioned before, is Chris Donahue. Yes. He is well built. He has a very nice arm, very good touch. I think that he's going to be somebody that Bruce is going to focus on for their offense. If he plays well, then the offense is going to play well. I think that's kind of like the correlation that I notice here. And then I'm going to move on now to Lourdes. Lourdes, as you mentioned before, doesn't really give you a lot of information about returning starters. It's difficult to always do that in these types of shows anyway. But as you said, Coach Walsh is one of the best coaches, or he's up there, right? Yes. He's one of the best coaches in Section 1. And he's been consistently doing well as the head coach at Lourdes. And I think that no matter what team he brings in, they're going to be competitive, right? I haven't seen Coach Walsh fail on any facet. And at the end of the day, we do know that he has athletes, right? Yes. Andrew Appilia is a fantastic athlete, Frank's Finest. And he is a all-around very good tight end, can put him anywhere on the field, but he can really, and on top of that, he can block, right? And I think that's a weapon that you can utilize to a very good degree. But there's a lot of other guys on this team. Joe Krause, right, is another guy. He's a very good two-way player, good athlete, and I think they'll utilize him more on the offense. I think seeing his role grow would only benefit them,
Yeah.
right? And I think he will naturally do that because he's becoming more of a leader on the team. I think he's going to be showing his athleticism to the next level this coming season.
Absolutely, Mark. So now let's move to the next division. Again, I don't know what these division names are. I'm just going to go division by division. And let's start with Yorktown. And they had a coaching change, a first-year coach. And I know I'm going to butcher his name, but Pantelis Ypsilantis, and they call him Coach Pont. So I don't know anyone out there can grade me on how I pronounced it. But in 2019, they went 8-2. They lost to Rye in the Section 1 championship. And, again, this is a new era. First-time coach. But the important thing, they kept the majority of the staff, which is really important. Okay, so I know new head coach, but a majority of the staff coming back is big. They've had, Yorktown has been one of the more winning programs in 1A. 6 or more wins in 8 of the 10 years, Mars. I mean, they've only had 3 losing seasons the last 15 years. So again, Yorktown has built itself up to be one of the prominent programs in 1A. And again, offensively and defensively, it was difficult to gauge the starters, but they lost the majority of them. I mean, offensively, I think they brought back 1 starter, 1 or 2 starters. And then on defense, I think it was 2 starters on defense, if I'm remembering correctly on the roster. But, rotation-wise, again, I think I saw 13 kids play on offense. 2 were underclassmen. Defensively, 13 kids rotating, and 3 were underclassmen. They graduated 33 players. So that's a lot. But the names to keep on, they do bring back some talent. And it starts with Keith Boyer. This kid's a Frank's finest running back, wide receiver, defensive back. He's one of the most explosive players in this class. He can hit that 5th, 6th gear very quickly. We talked about on Frank's finest. He's dynamic in space. And this kid is a home run hitter once he gets into open field. It's see you later. But he's going to be a really important two-way player. He's going to be the leader on both sides of the ball. He's going to have to play at a high level to help his team, who's going to have a lot of new faces out on the field. Another kid to keep in mind, Evan McCarr, cornerback, wide receiver, another senior. He started at corner. He rotated on offense. This is a good athlete. Again, he's going to be a reliable target in the passing game. And defensive back, he's going to have to play some man-to-man. He's going to have to play some zone. He's going to have to be a lockdown-type corner. Looking at the linebacker spot, which is another thing, this was a defense, Mars, that was number 2 in 1A, okay? And they had the number 1 offense. So this was a super talented but senior-heavy team. But looking at the linebacker spot and offensive line, Vincent Capelli, junior, 5'10", 190 pounds, right? Not the biggest guy, but a very active outside linebacker who did a real solid job tackling in open space. How does he get better with an increased role? Again, still a young football player, but he's going to have to be an important player on both sides of the ball, especially on the offensive line. Another guy to keep in mind, and this is a young guy, not very known, Marco McKnight. All right, he's an edge, running back, wide receiver. Again, a junior, 180 pounds, but a long frame, long arms. This kid, went out on the football field and he showed his length. He made some plays on the edge. And I'm interested to see this young football player, what he does, given an increased role. But, a bunch of new starters that have placed on both sides of the ball, Mars. You got to find out. I'm interested to see what they do at quarterback. I'm interested to see what they do on the offensive line, what they do on the defensive line. You're talking about a young, inexperienced team, and this is a difficult time to be a young, inexperienced team. But what do you know? Yorktown is a very smart program, usually a very well-coached program, and they're bringing back the majority of their staff. And I'm interested to see this new era, how it kicks off this year. But let's move on, Mars, to the next team in the division. John J. Cross River, and coached by Jimmy Clark, and he's been there since 2002, a long time. In 2019, they went 8-1. They lost to Yorktown in the semifinals. This, again, one of the more prominent programs in 1A. Not at the biggest school, but they consistently put out a good product. They've won 8 or more games in 3 straight years. That's 8 or more games in 3 straight years. They won the section title in 2018. Since 2009, which was last time they were under 500, Mars, they've been their record since 2009, 71-23. So, again, really fantastic job by the coaching staff, by the kids there. Offensively, they're going to return about 5 of their 11 starters. They do not bring back their quarterback, who was tremendous last year, but John Jay has become what people are referring to as quarterback university, as in each year they bring in a quarterback that, rushes for a crazy amount of yards, passes for a crazy amount of yards, close to 1,000 club each time. But the biggest strength to this team, even though everyone talks about quarterback, is the offensive line. They're bringing back 4 of their 5 starters on the offensive line, Mars, which is going to be huge for that new quarterback. Defensively, they bring back 6 of the 11 starters. And when I spoke to Coach, offensively, they like to play fast, they like to play up tempo, and they like to play aggressively. And, of course, they like to run the quarterback. I mean, that's kind of the way they do things there. On defense, they run that 3-3-5. They have a lot of defensive backs out there. They want to play, fast defensively. They want to bring multiple pressures, show multiple coverage. They want to confuse opposing offenses, and they like to have athleticism out there. That's why they bring out 5 defensive backs. And those defensive backs are expected to be very active in the run game. The goals obviously was to play some games. They're happy they're going to play some games, and they want to be a champion no matter what that is. Is it a league title? Is it is there going to be a section title? They want to be a champion. And they also really like the numbers that they've had. Right? I mean, they get kids to come play, multiple sport athletes, but there is going to be limited practice time. It's going to be hard to evaluate. And that every coach is going to experience that this year, so it's a good point. But looking at the players, March, obviously I got to start a quarterback, right? So who's going to be that next guy? And I think the guy leading the way is Nick Jardina, the senior. He played wide receiver last year. He's moving to the quarterback spot, and they've done this before. They'll take their best athlete, move him to the quarterback spot. He's going to play college ball as a wide receiver. He's, again, a good athlete. I'm interested to see his ability to throw the ball because I know he could run. So I'm interested to see that dynamic. But, Coach really liked this kid, and he thinks he's going to do a fantastic job. But moving to the offensive line is where I believe their strength is, and it starts with Matt Furrer. Offensive lineman, defensive tackle. He was a Frank's finest, a 3-year starter, Mars, most consistent two-way player. Love his feet. Love his tenacity on the defensive side as being disruptive. This kid is their best offensive lineman, and I think he's their best defensive lineman as well. He's their best two-way guy. Another guy at the offensive tackle spot and linebacker, Grady Halafanua. This kid is senior. Really like him at the linebacker spot. 6'1", 240 pounds. Defensively, he does a really good job attacking the line of scrimmage. Bit of a thumper, but on the offensive side, he's going to be that tackle that has the down block, has to move people on the edge, and he can do that. He has the strength. I'm expecting him to do the same thing. Another offensive lineman, Mars, at the center spot, Dan Gonzalez. He's one of the key cogs on the offensive line at 6 feet 225. Again, not very tall, but 225 is solid size at that in high school level. And again, going to be an important cog, another important cog on the O-line. And I'm interested to see his impact on defense as well. Stein, right, guard and defensive end. We're going to see this offensive line is going to be where their real strength is. And if you want to run with the quarterback, you're going to need good O-line play, and they're going to have it, I think, this year if they can bring everyone back. Another guy to keep in mind is the running back who is returning, John Connolly, the senior. I think he's a shifty runner. He ran well last year. I think he's a good complement to the quarterback running the football. So that's another name to keep in mind. Another kid I really like on the defensive side of the ball, and I think his impact on offense, he was a bit of an H-back on offense or tight end, but the linebacker, Ryan Brennan, he was a Frank's finest at the linebacker spot. He plays that outside-inside linebacker, really smooth linebacker, rangy guy, sideline-to-sideline guy. And I like his ability to drop into coverage and attack the line of scrimmage. This kid I really, really like at the linebacker spot. Another linebacker to keep in mind, he plays that outside linebacker, strong safety. Jack O'Reilly, this kid's 6'3", tall, long edge defender. Definitely could put on some weight, but another long guy out there. Cross River's got some length. So that's another guy. Coach raved about this kid, and I'm going to just throw this name out here as a potential breakout player, Mars, and it's a super young guy. Chris DiCharia. I just want to put him at athlete because he plays quarterback, wide receiver, running back. Coach says he's going to play practically everywhere. This kid is a sophomore, and Coach thinks he may end up being the best athlete on the team. Now, for a team with a bunch of athletes, that's a pretty high praise from Coach, who has seen a bunch of athletes in his time. They're definitely rave about this kid. I'm very intrigued to watch this, and that's why I believe he's going to be an X factor. Love to see him, what he does out there. Another young guy to keep in mind, Austin Zaccanino. Wide receiver and defensive back. JV kid, again, sophomore, really nice speed, and he's got solid hands. Again, I don't, dive too deep into the JV tape because they're young football players, right? But when you watch him play, he made some difficult catches even at the JV level that a lot of JV kids don't make. So I'm interested to see this kid, and I can't end it out without talking special teams. Mars, their kicker and punter, Lucas Orlovitz, the junior. Again, being able to change the field, being able to kick field goals is a weapon in high school, and I think I'm interested to see this kicker, how he progresses in coming into his junior year. Next team, Mars, let's talk about Lakeland. Coached by Michael Meadows. He's been there since 2017, I believe, and in 2019, excuse me, he went 4-5. They lost to Fox Lane in the quarters, I believe it was. Quarters or qualifying? I think it's quarters. But let's just move on. But I know they lost to Fox Lane at the end of the year. And in 2019, they doubled their wins from 2018. In 2018, they had 2 wins. They doubled it to 4. It was the most wins they've had since 2015 when they went 5-3. And they've not been 500 since that 2015. So I think this is going to be an interesting year for this program. Offensively, they bring back 5 of the 11 starters. They bring back their quarterback, 2 out of the 5 offensive line starters. Defensively, 6 out of the 11 projected starters. And when I spoke to Coach, he talks about the offensive side, led by Ryan Shern, their offensive coordinator. Their passing attack was good, and you obviously see that on tape, but he wants to improve in the run game. That's important. He felt that they were, leaning too heavily on one side of the ball, and for good reason. We'll talk about their quarterback. But defensively, they want to play fast. They think they have good depth, which will help with rotations on defense. We talked about depth being really important this year. Coach believes they have that on the defensive side of the ball. And the goals are simple. They want to improve from last year, right? And the biggest question mark to him is the lineman chemistry. And we talked about this. Linemen need synergy, and it's going to be important for Coach to get that. Players to keep in mind, I talked about the most important player, their quarterback, Tyler Santucci, captain. He's the engine of the offense. He, again, mobile kid. I think he showed good anticipation. He made some wow throws that I saw. Again, sometimes he'll take some gambles, but, this kid trusts in his ability, trusts in his skill guys. Sometimes that's a really great thing, and sometimes it'll get you in trouble. But I think this kid is a very good football player, and he's going to be an important key for this team. Another kid to keep in mind at the defensive end spot and offensive lineman, Carl Lund, Jr. I think he's the anchor on the defensive line. He uses his speed really well. And, he's not a tall guy, but at 220 pounds, this kid, you can see him. He's putting on muscle to hold his point of attack, but he really won with speed and his ability to use his hands. And I think now to see him grow and go on to the next year of varsity, I'm very intrigued to see how this kid reacts. I think he's a very good football player. Another kid to keep in mind at the linebacker spot, Daniel Libretti, the senior, 5'10", 170 pounds. Again, not the most big guy, but very active, has a nose for the football. Another weapon that you're going to see for Tyler, Rob Nardelli, the wide receiver and defensive back, right? He's their go-to target. He runs solid patterns. He does also a really decent job of finding holes in the zone. So when people run zone on you, you want a wide receiver that, not so robotic. Like when you see space, you kind of want to drift into that. I think this kid does a good job at that. Another wide receiver to keep in mind, Mark Cummings. He was injured last year. Another weapon. And finally, I want to talk about tight end, defensive end. He was moved from the offensive line to tight end. Michael Mulhern, the senior. Coach likes the work that he put in. A couple linemen to keep in mind because, again, offensive line is going to be big. Can you protect the quarterback? Can you give him time to make plays? You're talking about Kevin Hickey, Anthony Fiorentino, the senior, and offensive line Ian Whisker. So, Ian Whisker is a young JV player, but the coaches really like what they saw on the JV level. They think this could be a young player on the rise. So that's kind of where Lakeland is, Mars. Moving on, let's go to Horace Greely. And this is coached by Coach Joe Kearns. And in 2019, they went 2-7. 2018, they were 1-8. Again, this is a program that's trying to build, trying to grow. And it's going to take some time. Again, it's hard to grow in a class like this because there's a lot of good football teams. But they haven't had a 500 above record since, I believe it is, was it 2017 or 2018? I think they went 6-3. Their highest total since then was that 2013 where they had 4 wins. Again, this is going to take some time. But the good news, they're bringing back some football players, right? 6 out of the 11 offensive starters. They do have to replace their quarterback. O-line, 3 out of the 5 are returning. Their center, their guard, and their tackle. On the defensive side of the ball, they projected 5 of the 11 Mars. When I spoke to Coach, he wants to improve up front. And Coach knows that you've got to win in the trenches. They want to run the ball first, but they want to spread you out, and they want to run RPOs. Defensively, they're led by their defensive coordinator, Ryan Spillane, who does a really good job. And what they want is for the team to have an overall be better at tackling, right? You're not going to be the biggest team, so what do you got to do? You got to win in fundamentals. And tackling is one of the biggest ones. Coach said he wants to win more than 2 games, right? They went from 1 win in 2018 to 2 wins, and now they want to improve on those 2 wins. He also wants to keep everyone healthy. That's an important thing too, right? Shorten practices, COVID time. You want all the kids to have fun, be healthy, come out of it, unscathed. A couple players to keep in mind. I think it starts with their Swiss Army knife, which I like to call him, running back, defensive back, and quarterback, Mike Marangolo. This kid, the senior, he's a shifty. He's just a baller. He is I think their most important player because he could do a lot of different things. He's that player on this team that defensive coordinators definitely need to focus on. Another guy to keep in mind, Harrison Ginsberg, the center and linebacker at 6 feet, 200 pounds. He's going to have to anchor the O-line. He's also going to be one of their most active defensive players. He's going to be an important two-way player. I'm interested to see how he works. Another offensive lineman and linebacker, Marsh, Jack Marinello, the senior, 5'11", 200 pounds, 3-year starter. Again, I'm not talking about real tall guys, but guys who are solidly built, right? They're going to have to anchor in this division. You're going to have to be able to move some bodies, and those are going to be two really important players. Another player I'm interested to see what they do at the quarterback spot. And Coach talked about it, one young man, Ryan Wool, the junior. I'm interested to see what he does at the quarterback spot. Is he the front runner? Is he going to take that job? What is he going to do at the quarterback spot? Another guy to keep in mind, he was hurt last year, Jonah Ferraro, the senior. Interested to see they're going to need a lead back, someone who can help. Mike, is this a name? Is this somebody who's going to contribute, Mars? Again, they won't be big up front, but they're going to bring back some experience on the offensive line. They're going to bring back some athleticism. They have one of the better backs in Mike Marangolo. I'm interested to see this program, what they do in this March. Do they take the step that they want to take, right? Coach says they want to win more than 2 games. Do they take that step? Very interested to see that. Finally, March, to round it off before we go into discussion, Walter Panas. And this is coached by Bill Castro. His first season in 2019, they went 2-7. Coach Castro coached at pace. He's trying to rebuild that program. They haven't had an over 500 record since 2017. He's trying to get that program back to that. They've been 5-12 in the last 2 years. Offensively, they bring back about 5 of their 11 starters, right? 2 running backs, 2 offensive linemen, and 1 wide receiver. They have to replace the quarterback spot, which is going to be big. Offensive line, 2 out of the 5, right? Defensively is where they're going to get a lot of ammunition back. 7 of the 11 starters, Mars. 2 linebackers, 3 DBs, and 2 defensive linemen. So they're definitely bringing back some guys on that side of the ball. Offensively, coach wants to spread. He wants to go into 10 personnel, wants to go into 11 personnel. They want to run the RPOs. They want to run some power and gap scheme, and they want to get the quarterback involved in the run game. That's kind of his mindset. Defensively, they run a 4-2-5. They want to stop the run, be aggressive, and force turnovers. And the goal, I really liked when I spoke to Coach Castro, their goal is a motto, and it's called stealth. And what that means is they want to be sound, Mars. They want to be tough. They want to bring effort. They want to be accountable. They want to show leadership. They want to be a team, and they need to be humble. Right? So I like that. I just wanted to share that. Stealth is what they call it. And I think it's a pretty cool goal to have. Some of the players to watch, Mars, offensive lineman Michael Iannucci, the senior, 6'5", 265 pounds. This kid is a mountain of a man. And Coach raved about how he worked on his feet this offseason. And if he works on his feet and he improves, this kid could be somebody on the offensive side who could play at the next level. Another guy to keep an eye on, Oliver Glenn, track and field guy, Mars. He's going to college to actually throw the wide receiver and defensive back spot. He's going to be an important two-way player for them. Somebody to keep in mind, a really, really young football player, a freshman, Mars. So I'm going to, normally you don't talk about freshmen on the Varsity show, but I'm going to talk about Travis Cartucci. Okay, and Coach really raved about him. He plays running back, wide receiver, and safety. 5'9", 165 pounds. This kid is a baby, right? He's a baby, but Coach is really excited about his athleticism, and he has that athleticism that is beyond his years. Anyone who watches the show kind of can understand what I mean. This is a kid who could play with kids older than him. He has that athleticism. I'm really intrigued to see this kind of guy because he could be that guy that, by the end of the year that, this could be somebody who could be one of the better athletes in this program. And to say that as a freshman going into his sophomore year is definitely a big it's definitely a big praise. Another couple guys at the running back spot. Coach talked about wanting to run the ball. Paul Ronga, the sophomore, solid vision, fluid hips. He needs to put on some more muscle, obviously. Another guy, James Duran, the senior. This kid is the more downhill guy at 6 feet, 205 pounds, downhill running back. Another guy to keep in mind is Roberto Brand, the senior, 5'8", 165 pounds. He's more the shifty guy, right? Not a big guy, but a shifty guy. So they're bringing back a couple guys who, they could run a running back by committee with the guys that I mentioned. Another guy to keep in mind, Marco Constantino, free safety, strong safety. Another defensive back, Stephen Butler, the senior. And finally, the linebacker, Dean Ragone, the senior. He led the team in tackles. He really has a nose for the football, wants to work on his technique, and the coach spoke about it. That's somebody definitely to keep in mind. And actually, one more I do want to talk about on the offensive line, Tyler Carter. So, I thought this kid was disruptive on the defensive end. I saw him make some plays, but he's going to have to be a two-way player, and I'm interested to see his growth into his senior season. Mars, that was one of the divisions. Who do you want to talk about?
Let me first talk about Yorktown. I think that this is going to be a different, not saying it's going to be a difficult year, but it's going to be harder than what they're used to because of the fact they lost so many starters that you mentioned earlier. But like you said, last year they were considered one of the best teams in Class 1A because they were leading in points per game and second in defensive points allowed per game. At the end of the day, I mean, it's hard to match exactly that same thing. But
especially with the seniors they lost.
Especially everyone that they lost. But, that means that as a team, you have to rely on your veteran presence, and I think that's going to be pretty evident when you see like Keith Boyer, and Evan McCurr. And those two guys are going to be probably the lead cogs in this team because they're the two. Not saying they're the only veteran presence, but they're probably the two biggest stars of the veterans that I've seen so far. And I think that they're going to really carry the load. And I think that I think Yorktown will surprise you. I think honestly, a lot of people looking at them and saying, "Well, you lost all your seniors, not going to be as good." Well, obviously, but I wouldn't be surprised that they are still very competitive for how many seniors that they lost. And then nextly, I'm going to talk about John Jay Cross River, and this is now kind of a team on the opposite spectrum. They are similar to the amount of returning players as like Somers, where they have 5 returning on offense, 6 returning on defense, and they really are a force, right? For many years, they've been a smaller school that's been really up there with the amount of wins that they've had over the past few years. Probably the most impressive thing about this team is that the offensive line is really going to be crucial to this development. I think that having 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen returning is going to be big. And as you mentioned earlier, John Jay Cross River is that team that is a breeding ground for just athletic quarterbacks, right? And I think it has to do with the fact they always get their best athlete and they put him in that spot. And I think that that's going to be kind of the recipe for success this year. But I think it's going to be riding on the back of the offensive line because those guys I watched and last year, even just years before them, the offensive line has always been stout, in my opinion. I feel like when they spread the ball around, the offensive line has always been consistent, and I think that's going to be the biggest thing that helps them, especially on the offensive end this coming season. So I really think John Jay Cross River is going to be a team to look out for this year. And I mean, that's kind of obvious.
I know it's an obvious one. So then I'm going to move on to the next division, Mars, and let's talk about the team that won in 2019, the Section 1A championship. That's Rye. And they're coached obviously by Dino Gar, who's been there a very, very long time. In 2019, they went 10-2. They won that section title versus Yorktown. And, Rye has kind of become, and I know this is high praise, it feels like they are the man, like they're the final boss of 1A these past few years. I think it's safe to say that. They've built quite a program that has been consistent and feels like you have to go through them to be the best team in 1A. And that's because they've had 7 straight years of 6 or more wins, Mars. 7 straight offensively. Now, they did lose a bunch of players from that championship team. Right? They only bring back 4 of the 11 projected starters. They got to replace their stud quarterback from last year. On the offensive line, 1 out of the 5 offensive linemen returning. So you're going to see a lot of new faces. Defensively, similar thing. 4 of the 11 starters coming back. And, when I spoke to Coach, he really liked the balance that they showed on offense. And he wants to keep that same balance. They could beat you throwing the ball. They could beat you running the ball. They want to keep defenses on their toes and not be kind of pushing on one side of the ball. Defensively, they want to improve on creating more stops and, getting off the field on third down. It was a big key. And forcing more turnovers. Obviously, every defensive coach wants to force more turnovers. But it really is an important factor of changing games is by forcing turnovers, winning the turnover battle. And Coach talks about, they want to win their league. If that's what it's going to be, a league title, is there going to be a section title? They want to win the league. The biggest question, obviously, on the offensive defensive line, we talked about it. 1 returning starter on the offensive line. They lost a bunch of guys on the D-line. And replacing the skill guys is going to be another big question. They had a bunch of skill dudes all over the place. But, Rye's built that program where it's kind of like the next man up. The first thing, it's got to start at the quarterback spot. Coach mentioned a couple quarterbacks vying for the starter role. I think one who could be the front runner, and that's Jack Griffiths, the senior. He plays quarterback and linebacker at 6'1", 195 pounds. He's got good size and thickness. I'm interested to see him throw the ball, how he controls that offense. This is a kid who's got good size, and I think, Coach has been impressed by him. A couple of the other guys vying for that spot, Teddy Berkery, the junior, and Owen Kovacs. the junior as well. So the quarterback battle is going to be an interesting one. I'm intrigued to see it. But let's talk about some of the skill guys, Mars. And at wide receiver and defensive back, Liam Lavelle, the senior, this kid is the most experienced returning wide receiver. I think he's going to be their most reliable target. This kid's another solid player. Runs solid routes, can make some contested catches. So I think he's going to be their most reliable guy. The next guy was a Frank's finest at outside linebacker, but he also plays wide receiver as well, Lucas Perez-Signini. Again, at the outside linebacker spot, I love his mixture of athleticism and length on the edge, but on the offensive side, it's going to be a big role. He's going to have to be another target. And again, I mentioned 6'3" with long arms. That is a big target. So I'm interested to see what he does on both sides of the ball. I'm already impressed with him on defense as an edge defender. We're going to see his role increase. Another guy, Frank's finest at the defensive back spot, but he also plays wide receiver, Jack Bartlett. I think he's a really smart football player. He has the ability to play zone on defense, play man. He tackles well in the run game. He's active in the run game. And we're going to see his role on the other side of the ball and see how that increases. He's going to have to be another important player. But what I feel is that this team can do, they talk about balance, but I feel they have a breakout star in the making at the running back spot, and this is the running back and linebacker, Caden Whalen. He's the junior. He was on the team last year as a sophomore. I believe he's going to be potentially their breakout player, Mars. He's got good size, shifty running back, and I believe at the end of the year he will be a household name for Rye. That's the kind of faith I have on him. But again, big question, offensive line, right? Their one returning guy in the offensive line spot. He also plays linebacker, Jack Garnett, the junior. Again, he was a young football player last year. Not the biggest guy, but he moves his feet really well. He's an athletic offensive lineman, and he's got a nastiness to him, which I like. Another offensive lineman, Aiden Cunningham, the junior. This kid is the big guy, 6'4", 210. Tall, long guy. Definitely could put on some muscle, but again, real good size. Again, a lacrosse player. This is another multi-sport athlete, so again, another athlete, right? Rye's just producing another athlete. Another individual to keep in mind, running back and linebacker, Jack O'Byrne, multiple sport athlete, getting those linebackers, getting that athleticism out on the field. I'm interested to see him in the running back role. Interested to see what he does on the defensive side. So again, another athlete. Finally, to round it off at the linebacker, Alex Tebedino, the senior. I mentioned a bunch of linebackers. They're gonna have to replace a bunch of kids. These are kind of the names that coach has thrown out there that you saw some flashes on tape. This is going to be a much bigger role, right? All those stars are gone. So I'm interested to see what Rye does to replace some of those big names. So those are some of the names definitely to keep on. Moving on to the next team, Mars. Let's talk about Harris, and coached by Jay Sirocco. 2019 was his first year, and they went 4-5. There was no playoffs for them, but again, he's trying to build a program that won 7 section titles to 2 states. Right, that's where they're Harrison. They're a well-known program. Trying to get it back to that point. They've had 2 straight years under 500 for the first time since before 2004. So this is going to be a big step, I think, for Harrison. And I'll tell you what, I think coach does a solid job, and he is bringing back some football players. Right, on offense, Mars, 7 of the 11 starters coming back, quarterback coming back. Offensive line is going to be the biggest question, but they are bringing back 2 of the 5. So we're going to see defensively 6 of the 11. So they are bringing back guys on both sides of the ball. When we talked to coach, right? They run that option offense. They saw growth as the season went on. You saw, and you could see that on tape. They've improved as the season went on. He definitely wants to improve the tempo on the team and reduce the turnovers. Defensively, there was a lot of change, when they first made the coaching changes. But he definitely wants to improve tackling. Tackling is going to be an important word for them, important priority. And the goal is to get better each week. They want to win those close games. They were in 3 overtime games last year. You need to win close games if you're going to be a good program, and that's what coach is emphasizing. When you go to the players, Mars, it obviously starts, I think, with their best player, running back and outside linebacker, Casey Judelson, right, the senior. Frank's finest at the running back spot. Well-built kid, 6 feet, 200 pounds. We know how hard of a worker he is. He's the bell cow for that option offense. I think he's one of the best backs in Section 1. I think they're moving him from inside to outside linebacker. So, again, he's going to be an impact 2-way player. Another important kid, quarterback Troy Strauss, the senior, 5'11". As the season went on, you saw him get more comfortable in that option offense, and you saw his play improve. When his play improved, you saw Harrison's offense improve. And because the option quarterback puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and he's going to be the X factor this year. Moving on to the next guy, I think is the breakout player to watch, Mars. A.J. Troilo, the junior, running back and outside linebacker. This kid at 5'9", not a very tall guy, But I think he's a real underrated two-way player who, as his role increases, as his kid builds on his body, I think he's going to make a big impact this year for this team. He is my breakout player for this year. There's some other names to keep an eye on. Wide receiver and defensive back, Anthony Palatucci. This kid is a really solid size kid. 6'3", 182 pounds. Big, long target at the wideout spot. At the defensive back spot, he kind of was that free safety. I think he even lined it up on the edge sometimes. So this was another versatile football player. Going to the offensive line, Mars, TJ Chiafone. This kid, a big boy, 6 feet, 300 pounds, Mars. Big man. At the senior spot, he was at guard. Definitely want to see him grow with his technique and with his strength. This is a big body kid that when he puts his weight on you, right, he'll move people out of the way. So I'm interested to see this offensive lineman. Another offensive lineman and linebacker, Thomas Ventriglio, the junior. Not tall, 5'9", Mars, but 220 pounds, well-built kid. He's the more athletic offensive lineman, obviously. And I think he blocks well at the second level. I like to see how he works on his strength. His ability to move people off their spot is going to be important. You got to be able to down block. You got to be able to pull. You got to be able to do a bunch of different things. He has the athleticism to do that. Another kid to keep in mind at the defensive end, outside linebacker spot, Johnny Karapitis, the junior, 6 feet, 205 pounds, three-sport athlete. There's going to be another kid who has to make an impact on the defensive side of the ball for them to be successful. And I talked about Harrison. They're going to bring back a bunch of kids. This is going to be, a real important year for them. Not just on the win total, but I want to see if they take that step into challenging Rye, right? Everyone knows the Harrison-Rye rivalry, huge rivalry, one of the biggest rivalries in Section 1. Let's see Harrison's growth. I'm really intrigued to see this Harrison football team. And I think they could be an underrated team. I think this year it could be a surprise for Harrison. I'm intrigued by this football team, Mars. Moving on, Pelham, coached by Artie Vigiano. In 2019, they went 3-6, no playoffs. But I'm going to tell you what, Pelham is a team that is rebuilding, and I think they showed some growth. And it might not show in the 3-6 record, but they had 2 winning seasons the last 5 years, okay? But before that, Mars, the previous 7 seasons, they only had 2 winning seasons. So they had 2 winning seasons the last 5 years. Before that, they only had 2 winning seasons in 7 years, okay? So you want to see this program become more consistent, obviously. But there's growth. You can see growth, and you'll see the growth in their numbers. Now, they're going to be a young football team this year. They, 4 of the 11 starters coming back, but they do bring back their quarterback. They do bring back, only 1 of the 5 offensive linemen. This is where they're going to be the biggest question mark. Skill guys in the offensive line, right? They have 1 senior, 3 juniors on the offensive line, 1 sophomore. Young offensive line. Defensively, again, not a lot of names to replace 3 out of the 11. But when I spoke to coach, and I think the staff does a pretty good job at Pelham, they run a multiple offense, Mars. Some days they want to beat you throwing. Some days they want to beat you running. But they do want to be more physical up front. That's going to be big for them. Defensively, big on fundamentals. They run that 4-3. They want to stop the run, be athletic in the back half. And goals-wise, they want to just focus on yourself. Don't worry about other teams. Be undefeated in fundamentals. I like that. Be undefeated in fundamentals. Buy into the program. When I talk about players, Mars, it starts with their quarterback. Obviously, Carlo Volpe, Frank's finest. I think he's one. We both think he's the best quarterback in 1A. He's got a really strong arm, the ability to make all the throws, intermediate and deep, with accuracy. That's why I think he is. But one of the more underrated players in 1A is the outside linebacker and tight end, Flynn Bryan. Really good athlete. He does a bunch of stuff well. 6'2", good size. I think he's one of the most underrated players in 1A. But my breakout player for this team is the defensive lineman and offensive lineman, Luke Green, sophomore at 6'1", 240 pounds, loves football, and he just plays angry. Now, he spent most of his time on a defensive side of the ball. He's definitely going to see the role increase on both sides. This kid could be the breakout player for this team. This is going to be someone who gets himself onto the scene this year. Will not shock me if that happens. Another kid to keep in mind, Thomas Shelton, the junior running back and linebacker. He's going to have to be the lead guy in the running game. They're going to need that if they want to run the ball. Talking about some weapons, wide receiver and the athlete, this is my X factor for this team. Jeremiah Reed, who's a transfer from Iona. I think he's going to be the X factor. He's going to be, I think, the top target in their passing game. This kid's a very good athlete. Every year we see people come onto the scene. I think this transfer is going to be a big key to that for them, and he could do a bunch of different things on both sides of the ball. Another kid wide receiver, Michael Romano, the junior. A couple other players, Dan Crenshaw, Connor Toe, Hunter Zale, the offensive lineman, 6'1", 200 pounds. Another kid I want to see grow into the season, linebacker and fullback Anthony Mota. Not a tall guy, but a tough kid, and I'm interested to see how he grows as well. There's a bunch of names that I've given on that front, Mars. Let's move on now to Eastchester, coached by Fred DiCarlo. He's been there since 2009. In 2019, they went 4-5. This is another consistent program, right? They won 4 more games in 3 straight, including 6 of the last 7 years. They won 4 straight to end 2019. Offensively, they bring back 6 of the 11 starters. They bring back their quarterback. 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen come back, which is going to be the strength of this team. And when I spoke to Coach Puccini, the assistant coach there. Defensively, they bring back 7 of the 11 starters. And when we talk about offense, what they did really well last year, they ran the ball well, and they hit on vertical passing game. So they want to be more consistent in the short and intermediate passing game to complement what they do well. Defensively, they like to play at a fast pace. They want to get off the field on third down and force more turnovers. And the goal is to make the playoffs, to win a championship. And we don't know what's going to happen this March, but that is the goal. Another one is to have fun. Right? They want the kids to have fun. When I talk about players, Mars, to keep an eye on, one of my favorite players in Class 1A, quarterback and linebacker Angelo Sparadino. This kid at 5'9", 190 pounds, right? Not tall, but real thick. I think he's a very dangerous football player. I think he's their best two-way guy. He's like an added running back at the quarterback spot, but he did make some nice throws. Again, not the strongest arm, but he made some accurate throws, especially off of play action. I really like him. He shows some real toughness. Looking at the offensive line is where their strength is going to be, Mars. Joe Chiafone, 5'10", 250. James Calabro, Frank's finest at 6'1", 250. And another offensive lineman, D-lineman, Chris Howard, the junior, at 6'1", 230. This is the strength. This is where the strength's going to be. If they're going to compete, it's going to be on the backs of that offensive line and running the ball. Looking at some weapons, Mars, Cam Clark, the senior, wide receiver DB, tight end, and defensive lineman, Mark Tamburo. He was really disruptive on defense. My X factor for the team, I got quarterback, running back, and defensive back, Christian D'Agostino at 5'11", 170 pounds. This kid, he can line up a quarterback, throw the ball. He can line up a wide receiver. He can throw it to him. He can run the ball if he wants. This kid is going to be that X factor. He's an additional weapon to Angelo, and I think he can have a really nice season. A couple other running backs, Mars. AJ Del Bracco at the running back spot, the senior. Another running back, Frank Campasso. Not tall, but a tough kid. This kid at 5'5". He was at linebacker and safety, too. Makes plays in the special team. One of my favorites. He makes plays in special teams. Lines up and blocks at the running back spot. My affinity for short guys, so I like him. Michael Farrell, offensive lineman and defensive lineman, a junior. We're going to see who's those other offensive linemen that filter in. And Joey Mancuso, another offensive lineman and defensive lineman. Finally, to round out the division, Mars, let's go to Sleepy Hollow. And coached by Coach Villatamila. He's been there since 2018. In 2019, they went 2-6, which was a one-win improvement from 2018. 2019 was the most wins since 2016. So, this is another rebuilding program. And you can have a mixture of really competitive big schools and schools that are rebuilding their program. And Sleepy Hollow is one of those. But they're bringing back a bunch of football players, right? On offense, 7 of the 11, all the skill guys are back. They bring back their quarterback. The biggest question on the offensive line, 1 out of the 5 are coming back. Defensively, 6 out of the 11 are coming back. Offensively, they were really good last year. They averaged 26.9 points a game, which was 7th in 1A. And Coach talked about he just wants to get the playmakers the ball as fast as you can. The question is going to be on the offensive line, like I mentioned. Defensively is where they struggled. They're a bit undersized, but they want to be in the right spot, and they want to be a better tackling football team. And, when I talk about the players, the guy who definitely is the most important key is the quarterback, Ben Good. 3-year starter. He's the pilot of that plane. He shows solid mobility, and I think he does a bunch of different things well. I think he's just really solid football player where he shows good accuracy. He can move around in the pocket, and he's going to be an important key for this team. Another kid to keep an eye on is wide receiver and tight end Dylan Nelson, Frank's finest. Really like him. He's smart, runs good routes, makes contested catches. Another kid, wide receiver, outside linebacker Kelvin Sullivan, two-way starter, going to be another important two-way player. Let's talk about the running back spot. Running back and defensive end Talon Carsto, high motor kid. He's going to be the lead back. Another kid to keep an eye on who was hurt last year, tight end defensive end Zach Rutter, 6'2", 185 pounds. They have weapons on the outside. The question is going to be up front. And one name to keep in mind, offensive and defensive lineman, Joselito Quitasaka, the junior. So the offensive line is going to be big because they have the weapons to compete. It's going to be, can they block for the quarterback? Can they stop the run? Up front is going to be big, Mars. Who do you want to talk about?
So I'm going to first talk about Rye. Rye being the defending champs is obviously you got to talk about them. The biggest issue I see right now is that they lost a lot of their stars. It's a pretty senior heavy team, but they are returning 4 of each on the offensive side and defensive side. The big question, as you mentioned earlier, is the quarterback, right? Is who's going to play quarterback, and also offensive line wise, who's going to be filling in the rest of those spots? I think those two are the biggest questions for me. But one thing that Rye always brings in is the skill players. I think the wide receivers and running backs for Rye are pretty solid, and I feel like they are going to help out whoever is the quarterback, whoever is the offensive line, because of their ability to kind of make plays. And I think that is a good spot for Rye. I think it's going to be more of a competitive division if they keep these divisions the same way. It'll be a little more competitive. I think Rye is still going to be a favorite. But now I think the rivalry game between Rye and my second team, Harrison, is going to be a little bit closer than what a lot of people are thinking. And I think Harrison's kind of in the opposite. I think Harrison is now returning more players than Rye. And I think that Harrison is going to be that program that, as you mentioned, is trying to bring back their golden age of football back in that town. And I think that this is going to be the starting point for them to do so. The fact that they have a lot of returning players gives them a big advantage, especially in this type of season, because of everyone's kind of stuck, not really practicing that much. And I think that's going to be something that's going to help them in the long run. But having a star athlete like Casey Judelson, Casey Judelson is really going to help them in the long run. But as you mentioned earlier, the X factor is going to be quarterback play, right? And whether or not the quarterback is going to play well or not play as well as they would hope is really what's going to jumpstart this offense going forward. But in my opinion, I think the offensive line depth is going to be the other big question, because if you have a solid group of guys, it will automatically make your offense more efficient. It'll make you not have to take as many gambles. And I think that that's always the first step of making any high school team, whether they can move the ball anywhere down the field. Yeah. And maybe it's just because I'm an offensive line guy and that's just my preference. But I think that if they can answer those questions efficiently, having a good quarterback play and good offensive line depth, then it means this team's going to move forward a lot faster. And then lastly, I kind of want to talk about Sleepy Hollow. I think that Sleepy Hollow, as you mentioned, is a growing program, but looking at the returning players, 7 out of the 11 on offense, 6 out of 11 on defense, it's going to help them. Now, the one thing that is a little surprising and concerning is the offensive line returning 1 out of the 5. But what is also very surprising is how efficient they were on offense, right? With this younger team from last year, based on their stats here, 26.9 points per game, 7th in Section 1A. Their biggest issue is their defense. Now, as Coach mentioned, if they can get better at tackling, being more efficient on the defensive side, this could be a team that can easily see their wins elevate, especially in a season where if you have veteran presence, it's going to help you. And I think Sleepy Hollow has that. Now, I'm not making any guarantees or anything because we don't know exact schedules or anything like that. But Sleepy Hollow, I think that this is going to be a year for them to improve on their weaknesses and really just go and focus on their strengths.
All right, Mars, let's move to what I believe is the toughest division in 1A, and that's the Rockland division. And let's start with Spring Valley, coached by Andrew Delva. They were in AA last year. They moved now to Single A. In 2019, they were 6-3. They lost to Carmel in the playoffs. They had back-to-back over 500 record for the first time in over 15 years. So definitely a program that is taking a step in the right direction. Coach does a really good job for that program. And they're bringing back a bunch of kids. Offensively, 7 of the 11 starters. They bring back their quarterback on the O-line. 3 out of the 5 offensive linemen are coming back. Defensively, 8 of the 11 starters coming back, Mars. They did lose 2 in the secondary, so that's where they'll be younger. But everybody else practically coming back. And Coach talked offensively, they like to play fast. They like to spread you out. And they like to get the playmakers the ball in space. Defensively, anyone who watches Spring Valley knows they like to blitz. They're aggressive. They like playing man. They like sending linebackers. But they want to improve versus power run teams. They feel like that was kind of their weakness. And the goal for them is to win a league title. And I think they're going to have the weapons to do it. And it starts at the quarterback spot. Dylan Bellafleur, the senior at 5'7", again, not a tall guy, but athletic. And the ball really pops out of his hands. I really like this kid. He's just a baller. Another kid to look into, Frank's finest at the linebacker spot, but also plays running back, is Sean Duncan, the senior. Athletic linebacker, has a nose for the football, and can really thump you. And I'm interested to see his role on offense, what it's going to be and how big at the running back spot. He was one of our Frank's finest on defense. Another Frank's finest on defense at the outside linebacker spot, but really an athlete on the offense too. Kind of a Swiss Army knife type player. That's Rashid Hobson, the senior. I really like his versatility on defense, but his offensive versatility is also pretty special. He'll line up at running back, wide receiver. He can line up at tight end in the slot. He can line up multiple spots, which puts a lot of pressure on the defense. This kid I can see, again, I don't like calling Frank's finest players breakout players, but I can see him break out on both sides of the ball, especially on offense this year. Another kid, in my opinion, is the X factor for this team, and that's Rochelle Paul. He's another athlete. You line up at wide receiver, you line him up at quarterback. He can run at quarterback for you. This kid is a home run hitter. I mean, once he gets into open field, he's really shifty. Once he gets open field, he has the speed to hit the home run. Another intriguing player to me at the defensive back spot, Mark Toussaint, the junior, 5'10". I think he has the tools to be a really good man-to-man guy, and you need good man-to-man football players to do the blitzing type defense that they have. This is a kid who can definitely be an impressive cog on the defensive side of the ball. When you look at the offensive line, it all starts with James Martinez, the senior. He's going to anchor both fronts. Another guy, Josh Bryan, on the offensive line. Ricky Jean on the offensive line. Finally, to wrap it all up, another linebacker, running back, Marvin's Alexis. I know he's still choosing what college to go, but to play football. Or I'm not sure if he's playing, but I really like him as a football player. He's just solid. A real solid football player. I think they have the weapons. They have the speed. The question is going to be size up front because I think they have athleticism in all three phases at the quarterback, running back, and lineman. Defensively, they have the defensive backs, in my opinion. They have the linebackers. It's going to be on both sides of the front. It's going to be big for this team, Mars. Let's talk about Nyack, coached by Jarrell Jones. He's been there since 2017. In 2019, 7-2. They lost to Lourdes in the qualifying round. But I tell you what, the coach has done a tremendous job, and the staff has done there. Since he's gotten there, he's improved their win total each of the last 3 years, going from 4 wins to 5 wins to 7 wins. Back-to-back over 500 record for the first time since 2013, 2014. The last time they had it 3 years in a row with a winning record was 2006 to 2008. So this is going to be an interesting year. Do they hit that milestone? They graduated 20 seniors, Mars, so a lot of new faces. 4 out of 11 on offense, returning. Quarterback, they got to replace. Offensive lineman, though, 3 out of the 5 returning, so that's good. Defensively, 3 out of the 11, but a bunch of guys who rotated. They had the number 1 defense in 1A last year, so they have quite a few guys they have to replace. Coach talked about it. He wants the offense to be simpler than years past. They run that wing T due to COVID. Defensively, he wants football smart kids. He wants kids to show good awareness. Question is, how much time they're going to have to implement their scheme. It's going to be difficult with a couple weeks of practice. But the goal is to be competitive every game. He wants to be considered, for Nyack to be considered an elite program. And, to do that, you got to beat elite programs. So that's kind of the mindset that they have, and I think it's a good one. But let's talk about the players, Mars. It all starts with quarterback Kevin Fowler. I think he's the front runner to take the quarterback job. I think he shows really solid anticipation and accuracy on his throws. Solid, tall kid with some good touch. Sometimes he gambles a little bit too much, but he believes in his ability, his accuracy, and sometimes he makes some fantastic throws. Another kid to keep an eye on are Frank's finest at defensive back, but also running back Isaiah Davis. I think he's a good athlete, smooth hips. I think he's going to be a big two-way player for this team. An underrated player, I think, who's going to be the breakout player for this team, Daniel Cephas, the senior linebacker and wide receiver. I think he's one of the more active defensive players. Just a real solid, steady player. Elijah Paku is someone also on the defensive line that you got to keep an eye on. And, I think they're going to have the weapons at the running back or wing back, whatever you want to call it, slot back. Teron Turner is another guy. It's 6 feet, 165 pounds. He has that 4.45 speed, clearly a home run hitter. You get those jet sweeps, those pitch sweeps. Once he gets into space, see you later. A couple of other running backs, Jaden Coulange, the junior, and Zach Coleman, the senior. Both versatile backs. Again, I think they're really going to have a nice array of weapons, especially in the wing T offense, especially on the edge, guys at the slot back spot. Question to me is who's going to be that bell cow fullback? That's going to be the question I have. and also on the offensive and defensive line. That's going to be the big question for this team, Mars. Let's move to another team, which I actually feel is up there with the most talented teams in 1A, and that's Clarkstown South, Mars. Coached by Mike Scarpelli. He's been there for a long time, since 2002. In 2019, they went 6-3, and they lost to their rival Clarkstown North in the qualifying round. So you know that definitely has irked them how the season ended. But I tell you what, they're one of the most prominent programs in 1A. I think one of the more underrated programs. They've won 6 or more games the last 6 years. They returned 32 seniors, Morris. Offensively, it's projected about 5 of the 11 starters. They bring back their quarterback, 2 out of the 5 offensive linemen. Defensively, only 3 of the 11 starters, but I mentioned a lot of rotational guys, 32 seniors coming back. And I just want to talk about some of those players. It all starts at the quarterback spot. Dennis Rodan, I think he's a real smooth quarterback. I love his toughness in the pocket, his ability to throw accurately in intermediate throws. This kid's another baller, and he has the mobility to hurt you with his legs, too. A couple of his weapons, Mars. Peter Gleitzia, wide receiver and defensive back. Good route runner, really good speed. He's also a deadly returner. Nate Martin's another guy, wide receiver and cornerback. Another good straight line speed guy, deep threat. He knows how to make some contested catches. They have some weapons, but, two guys next that I want to talk about. The Mariahs. So Mark Mariah was a Frank's finest at the linebacker spot, but he's a running back and linebacker. I love the way he attacks the line of scrimmage as a linebacker. And on offense, he's a downhill runner. He'll run you over. He likes contact. And then John Mariah, linebacker, outside linebacker. He's your typical Mike linebacker, a thumper, shows solid range, and that's 6'1", decent size. But he's also a solid offensive lineman. Again, a solid two-way player. One of my favorite players, Mars, is Michael Spiegel, the defensive lineman and offensive lineman. Frank's finest on the defensive end. I think he's the most versatile interior defensive lineman in the class. He's disruptive in the pass and run game. If he works on just staying low, I think he could be even better, which is saying a lot because he was really disruptive. And on the offensive line, he's really strong. A couple other guys on the O-line, keep in mind, Michael Tortorello, the senior, Ryan Hollahan. And someone who intrigues me, a young football player, intriguing prospect, Jack Ryan, Mars, the sophomore, at 6'3", 230 pounds as a sophomore. I'm interested to see if, number one, obviously playing on the varsity, what his role is going to be, because I watched the offseason work that he does. This kid works, and this kid is a solid frame kid who is a really intriguing prospect. Another intriguing prospect from the JV, Parker Mello, running back, wide receiver, and defensive back. I'm interested to see. This could be a young man that definitely impresses people at the varsity level. And finally, at the kicker spot, Sean Levins, the senior, he was a Frank's finest. Kicking game is going to be really important. And they have somebody to come back who was very successful last year. I'm interested to see it. I think this is one of the most talented teams in the class, Mars. And what impresses me the most is not just talent at each spot, but the depth that they have. And I think that's going to be huge this year, Mars. Before we get to the last 2 teams in the Rockland League, which team do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about Clarkstown South. And you kind of mentioned a lot of things I was going to say, but the fact is, they've been a consistently good program for several years. I mean, you mentioned it, won 6 or more games the last 6 years. That's very good. Very, as you mentioned, very underrated. And I think that they have, as you mentioned, a lot of talent on all different levels. Not even just star players, but depth to kind of be behind them. And like you said, that rotation that they were having last year is really going to pay off, because in a season like COVID, like this is right now, where you're going to need to have a more condensed playbook. You're going to need to have more of that veteran presence is going to be a big deal. And I think that's something that Clarkstown South is going to focus on. Really leaning on their veterans to kind of take the leadership role. And you can kind of just take a look at their team. I mean, they're going to have, like you said, 32 seniors on this team this year. I mean, that's a lot. But obviously that's going to pay off in the long run. I mean, you have a lot of these key players that I think will play big roles in this team. Like you said, the Mariah, both Mark Mariah and John Mariah are going to be big cogs on this team. But Michael Spiegel is going to be another big, versatile player on both sides of the ball. That's going to be crucial to their success. And I think that this, not only just those guys, but a long list of players that are going to be players that were once maybe rotational are now going to be key starters in this team. And I think that's going to be something that Clarkstown South is going to really rely on, and really hope that they take that next step to be successful players, to really extend their winning streak.
Absolutely. And let's go to the final 2 teams, same division. But let's go to Clarkstown North, coached by Joe Chongone, who's been there, another long-tenured coach, really solid coach, and solid staff to do at Clarkstown North. In 2019, they went 4-6. They lost to Somers in the quarterfinals, but the big game was that upset that they had on their rival Clarkstown South in the qualifying round to make the playoffs. And they've had a winning season 7 out of the 8 years. They have lost 2 straight in the quarters, so they've kind of run into a little roadblock there. They've lost some key players, right? Bring back 4 of the 11 starters on offense. Got to replace their quarterback, 2 out of the 5 on the offensive line. They also are returning 4 out of the 11 projected starters on defense. And when I spoke to Coach offensively, they want to do a better job controlling the pace of game, improving the passing game as well. They run that wing T offense as well. They want to definitely improve on the passing game. Defensively, they just want to improve overall on defensive speed. I think they do need to do a better job in coverage. Coach talked about that. They did get beat in the passing game a little too often. The goal for Coach is pretty much give the seniors the opportunity to play and have fun. And I think, again, it's an important message for everybody. But going to the players, Mars, I think it starts at halfback and defensive back. Mike Farnan, he was a Frank's finest at the safety spot. He's a real thumper at the safety spot. But I think he's a shifty downhill running back at that wing back spot. He's going to be important. Another really important football player who I really like, offensive lineman and linebacker, Adam Len, Frank's finest. A couple other kids at the halfback. You can call them, tailback, wide receiver, running back, and linebacker. Cameron Lee, a long athlete. A couple of the other names, Eric Gilzine, the junior, running back DB. Jared Katz, running back and defensive back, the senior. Look on the offensive line, Jimmy Moline, the offensive lineman and defensive lineman, coming back, going to be another cog on the offensive line. But to me, the 2 Sadoffs are important. Corey Sadoff at the quarterback spot, he was a darn good defensive end. I'm interested to see if he still stays playing both ways because I think he's going to take that quarterback spot. But he's a pitcher going to Rhode Island to play baseball. So, again, another multi-sport athlete. You need a tough guy to run that wing T offensive quarterback spot. And I think this kid has it. Now, another good football player, Matt Sadoff. He was really solid at the outside linebacker spot. I'm interested to see his role change. And looking at the offensive line, a couple more names. Nick Olson, the junior. Nick Chaikun, offensive lineman and defensive lineman. Again, I think they have a solid mix of juniors and seniors. One thing I know is that they're going to be a well-coached, tough football team. They do have to replace a lot of kids, so I'm interested to see how they do. Finally, to wrap it all up, Mars, Tappan Z, coached by Coach Ralphie Annucci. He's been there since 2017. They went 3-7 in 2019. There's another team building the program, right? They're looking for their first winning season since 2016. And I think they're going to bring back some kids, right? Offensively, 5 of the 11 starters come back. They do have to replace a very good quarterback. But the biggest problem, offensive line, they're bringing back none of the starters on the offensive line, which it's tough. That's tough. Defensively, 5 of the 11 starters coming back. When I spoke to Coach about his philosophy on offense, he wants to spread the ball around, but he also wants to improve the run game. The run game was definitely an emphasis to me. Defensively, they gave up just too many big plays, and Coach emphasized that, you got to prevent the big plays. They didn't do a good enough job of that last year. And he wants the seniors to have a great season, to make sure everyone is in a safe environment as well, another important aspect. When you look at the players, my favorite player on this team is their wide receiver and cornerback, Andrew Tarpey. He was Frank's finest at the wideout spot. He could be the best wide receiver in A. And he just wins with route running, solid speed, good hands. I mean, there's a lot to like. The only thing that hurts him is he's not tall. Right? That's the only thing that hurts him, but he wins multiple ways, and he does a good job. Another guy to keep in mind, Ben Seltzer. He might be the quarterback. He played tight end, free safety. This kid's 6 feet, 170 pounds. Really solid offensive target. I'm interested to see if he makes that move to the quarterback spot, how he does. A couple of running backs to keep in mind. Sean Sullivan, the senior, running back and linebacker. Another running back and linebacker, Anthony Del Felice. And finally, Stefan Barakin. I just mentioned 3 backs, 3 different kind of backs. One thinner, one a little bit taller. They could do a running back by committee with those guys. Another kind of running back, quarterback, linebacker, Mike Mooney, the junior. Interested to see what his role is going to be. Again, quarterback spot is going to be big. We're going to find out who wins that. Another quarterback, defensive back, Ciaran O'Connor. Again, these are some of the names to keep in mind. It's hard until practices begin who takes what spot and get a better idea. But finally, to wrap it all up on the offensive and defensive line, Matt Palines, the junior, and Fid Bolger. Again, no starters. We're coming back for the offensive line. So these are the kind of names that are going to have to not just take the job, but be important cogs to this team if they're going to be successful. And Mars, which one of the teams you want to talk about to wrap it all up?
I'm going to talk about Clarkstown North. I think that it's weird. Both North and South are very similar in how their makeup is. I think they both have very talented rosters. I think that the showdown between the two of them is going to be a bloodbath, in my opinion, because of what happened in the previous year.
Yeah.
And just normally, it's always a good rivalry game because these two teams, these two programs, have been really establishing themselves as being consistently solid. And I think, like, you look at North having a winning season the last 7 to 8 out of the 8 years, which is pretty good, especially in a class that is a gauntlet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's something that is really to pat yourself on the back for. But they're going to be led by their senior group, just like South, and that's why I kind of mentioned that they're very similar. I think that they're, especially in this type of season, I'll say it again, you're going to rely on your senior heavy group, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to be crucial to their success. I mean, Mike Farnan is going to be somebody that is going to play, in my opinion, not only just a breakout star for them, but going to be really their biggest X factor. His successes are really going to drive the offense going forward. But I think he's really just shown himself to be a very good two-way athlete. And I think that they're going to rely on him quite a lot, as well as all these other senior starters. All right, so I think it's going to be a pretty solid showdown, man.
It is, and that is the end. Whew, a lot of teams we had to go through, a lot of programs, a lot of people we had to recognize. This is definitely the depth of this class is huge. I think there's a lot of talent. It's going to be a very intriguing class, Mars. But that is our Section 1A team preview show.
Yep.
I know it was a long one, a lot of information thrown out to everybody, but I want to thank everyone for tuning into the show. Our next show will be on 1B, which will be coming the next days, I think about a week or so. But that'll be the next show. But appreciate everyone for tuning in. I hope you guys continue to have a safe environment. And boy, are we excited for some more football.
Oh, yeah, man.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all very soon.